Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Yoma Daf Mem Dalid is focusing on the halacha that no one is allowed to be inside the heichal during the time that the Kohen Gadol is performing the avoda inside the Kodesh Kodashim. The Gemara will first analyze the pasuk that says that halacha and learn something out of each phrase. The Gemara then will discuss a general halacha that nobody is allowed to be in the heichal during other avodos, and the Gemara will discuss the expansion of that area to between the mizbeach and the ulam, that's the outer hallway of the heichal. The Gemara will say when does that expansion apply, during which avodos, and there'll be a statement from an Amora on that, a kasha from a Brisa, and a very complex discussion of what the Brisa means exactly. The Gemara will then give the source of the halacha, and then the Gemara will refer back to our old Mishnah and discuss a number of the steps which we said we took to make it easier for the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur not to have such physical labor in the transport of the coals from the fire, and the Gemara will explain some of the tools used and some of the ways in which things became easier. Okay, so first of all, we're discussing the halacha that no one's allowed to be in the Kodesh when the Kohen Gadol is going into the Kodesh Kodashim. So the Gemara analyzes the pasuk that gives us that halacha. So it says as follows. It says, V'chol adam lo yeh b'oel moed. Nobody's allowed to be in the oel moed. The Gemara says oel moed, they're not allowed to be, but in the azara they are allowed to be. That's very specific. In the courtyard they're allowed to be, just not inside the building. Then it says, B'voyoy lechaper, during the time that he comes to be mechaper. The Gemara says that this comes to teach us that all types of kapara inside the Kodesh Kodashim, any activity that brings kapara inside the Kodesh Kodashim that the Kohen Gadol is doing, during that time it's also for anybody to be in the Heichal. That includes the Ketoris inside the Kodesh Kodashim and the blood applications inside the Kodesh Kodashim. The Gemara says later, why would I think that it's only the Ketoris and not the blood applications? The Gemara says because the pasuk finishes off later, and it says that what's he doing in the Erev Chipur? Ba'adoy v'ad be'esiv v'ad kol Klal Yisrael. He's atoning for himself, for his household, and for all of Klal Yisrael. That sounds like we're only referring to the one action that atones for everybody. That's Ketoris, which atones equally for everybody. The bloods, there was different bloods. There was one for the Par, which atones for him, and a different one for the Soyer, which atones for Klal Yisrael. So the blood applications is individualized. So you may think that we're not referring to that. Therefore, the pasuk has to say b'vo lechaper. Any type of kapara that he's doing in the Kodesh Kodashim, nobody's allowed to be inside the heichal. Okay, going further in the pasuk, it says b'kodesh, in the holy. When he's in the holy, Gemara says that's to teach us that it's not only the Ol Moed of the Mishkan, because it said Ol Moed, but any heichal which is parallel to the Ol Moed throughout the generations, whether it's in the Mishkan of the Midbar, Mishkan Shiloh, or the actually built Beis Hamikdash, whatever it is, any Kodesh, the same halacha applies. No one's allowed to be in there when the Kohen Gadol is in the Kodesh HaKodashim. Now, you may think that it's only while he's going in. How do you know that it's when he's on the way out? You're still not allowed to be there because it says Bevo, and then it says Ad Seisei, until he comes out. And therefore we know that halacha continues all the way until he comes out. Now, the pasuk ends off and it says V'chipur ba'adoy v'ad beisiv v'ad Kol Kahal Yisrael. This teaches us that there's an order. First, he does the blood application for himself. That's the part. Then he does the one for his family, which is also from the part. And then he does the one for all of Klal Yisrael, which comes from the Sa'ir, the goat that he brings over there. Now, the Gemara says, based on what you've just told me, it comes out that the Ketoris is Mechaper. The Ketoris brings atonement. Where do you ever find the Ketoris is Mechaper? I thought blood is Mechaper. The says no, Ketoris is Mechaper. You find by the plague in the times of Korach that Moshe told Aaron, take a shovelful of Ketoris and bring it, and that'll stop the plague. And that does that. Stop the people from the dying. The Gemara says because Ketoris is something quiet, it goes inside the Moed, or inside the Heichal without any fanfare, and that is Mechaper on something like Lashon Hara, which is what Korach was doing on Moshe, which is also something quiet that takes place quietly and has insidious negative effects, and therefore this takes that all off as well. The Gemara now moves on to discuss an expansion of this halacha, that you have to leave the Heichal during the avoda that goes on inside the Kodesh HaKodashim. And the Gemara says there's another zone, and that's the zone between the Mizbeach and the Ulam. Between the Mizbeach and the building of the Heichal, the Ulam is the front hall of the Heichal itself. Let's call that zone 2. So there's an expansion, midrabanan, you shouldn't stay in zone 2 at all. And the Gemara quotes a Mishnah that says, just like you have to leave zone 1 during the Ketoris, you have to leave the Heichal during the Ketoris, you also have to leave zone 2 during the Ketoris. Now the Gemara introduces a statement of Rav Elazar, and the Gemara is going to try to find a Mishnah, which will be a complex discussion that the Gemara feels refutes Rav Elazar. The Gemara will change its understanding of what the Mishnah means to say a few times until it all fits. What does Rav Elazar say? Rav Elazar says there's two types of Ketoris. There's Ketoris inside the Kodesh Kodashim, that's only on Yom Kippur, and there's Ketoris in the Heichal that's brought every day. This that you have to leave zone 2 is only when the Ketoris is going on neighboring to zone 2. What's going on in the Heichal itself, that's the everyday Ketoris. However, the Ketoris on Yom Kippur, which is inside the Kodesh Kodashim, deep inside, there you only have to leave the Heichal, you don't have to leave zone 2. That's too far removed. The Rabbanan weren't concerned that if you're in zone 2, you're going to end up going all the way into the Heichal and into the Kodesh Kodashim. That's not an issue. So the only issue is neighboring zones. Now, the Gemara is going to introduce a Mishnah. The Gemara is going to say that it conflicts with Rav Elazar. The Mishnah talks about 4 types of avodos in places. We have 2 avodos in 2 places for a total of 4 cases. We have the Ketoris and the blood application. There's a Ketoris and blood application in the Heichal, and there's a Ketoris and blood application in the Kodesh Kodashim. Ketoris in the Heichal and the Kodesh Kodashim we've just discussed. Every day Ketoris was in the Heichal, and Yom Kippur Ketoris was also in the Kodesh Kodashim. As far as blood applications, usually blood application is in the Azar, not even in the Heichal. There are certain carbonos that come inside the Heichal. Those are the carbon of the Kohen Gadol who makes a mistake, or a special seir for a tzibor's avodah zarah, that the entire congregation or rov of it was avodah zarah based on a mistake or a ruling. There was an error that most people followed. These require special karbonos chatas, that the blood goes actually inside the heichal and is put on the mizbeach hazov and sprinkled towards the paroiches. So that's blood application inside the heichal. And then there's a further blood application inside the Kodesh Kodashim, and that is the blood application on Yom Kippur, which goes on the kaporos. So we have 4 cases: Ketoris in the heichal, Ketoris in the Kodesh Kodashim, blood application in the heichal, blood application in the Kodesh Kodashim. So this Mishnah says the following thing. This Mishnah says that there's no difference between the 2 zones as far as where you have to leave. The zones of the Heichal and the zone of between the Ulam and the Mizbeach, you have to leave both zones, whether we're talking about Ketoris or you're talking about blood applications. It does not specify what Ketoris and what blood applications. The simplest understanding is that it's referring to Ketoris and blood applications going on in the Heichal. Both of them, you have to leave both zones. The Mishnah then goes on and says, so what's the difference between the 2 zones? The difference is, one you only have to leave during Ketoris, and the other you have to leave even during non-Ketoris. The Gemara assumes non-Ketoris means blood applications. If so, what's it referring to when it says one you have to leave during Ketoris, one you have to leave during blood applications? It's not referring to in the Heichal. We already know in the Heichal, we just said that in the Heichal you have to leave both zones during both Ketoris and blood applications. Obviously, it's referring to Ketoris and blood applications in the Kodesh Kodashim. And what it's saying is that in the Kodesh Kodashim, you have to leave both zones during Ketoris. You don't have to leave both zones during blood applications. This clearly contradicts what Rav Elazar said, because he said that you don't have to leave the zone 2 during Ketoris inside the Kodesh Kodashim. Here we're saying that during Ketoris inside the Kodesh Kodashim you have to leave, and during non-Ketoris, meaning blood applications, we're assuming you only have to leave the Heichal, you don't have to leave the second zone. Okay, so that rejects Rav Elazar. That's the Gemara's kasha. The Gemara's answer is no. When we're talking about Ketoris in this context, we're not talking about inside the Kodesh Kodashim. We're comparing Ketoris in the Heichal to blood applications in the Kodesh Kodashim. And we're saying as follows. We're saying that the difference between the 2 zones is that the words the Mishnah uses are that you only have to leave both zones during Ketoris and not during non-Ketoris. Non-Ketoris is referring to blood applications, but Ketoris is referring to blood application inside the Heichal. So we say as follows: Ketoris in the Heichal, you have to leave both zones. that's different than blood applications in the Kodesh Kodashim, where you only have to leave the Heichel, and you don't have to leave the second zone. That's how the Gemara wants to establish things. Therefore, it's clear that this Mishnah is certainly holding that Ketores, when Ketores is being brought in the Kodesh Kodashim, you do not have to leave the between the Ulam and the Mizbech. You don't have to leave zone 2, you only have to leave zone 1. So the Gemara says, if that's true, so why don't we say that that's the difference? If we're looking for a difference between the zones, why do we have to go to the blood application? If what you're saying is correct, that Ketores is different, Ketores and Kodesh Kodashim is different between the two, and the Mishnah, when it was talking about that there's a difference between Ketores and non-Ketores, and non-Ketores means blood applications, and we're comparing the Ketores in the Heichel to the blood application in the Kodesh Kodashim, well, just say simply, there's a difference as far as Ketores is concerned. Ketores in the Kodesh Kodashim, the difference is Ketores in the Kodesh Kodashim, you only have to leave the Heichel, you don't have to leave zone 2. It's a very simple thing, you don't have to go to blood applications. So the Gemara answers, and the Gemara says that's exactly what we meant. When we said that there's a difference between Ketores and non-Ketores, you thought non-Ketores means blood applications. That's not what it means. It means non-Ketores means Ketores inside the Kodesh Kodashim. Ketores and non-Ketores means Ketores in the Heichel and Ketores in Kodesh Kodashim. Now, when we said non-Ketores, we meant Ketores in a different place. Ketores in the Kodesh Kodashim. We're saying as follows. The difference between the two zones are that in the Heichel you have to leave for Ketores that's taking place in the Heichel, and you also have to leave for Ketores that's taking place inside the Kodesh Kodashim. As far as zone 2, you only have to leave for Ketores that's taking place in the Heichel. You do not have to leave for non-Ketores, which means Ketores that's taking place in the Kodesh HaKodashim. And therefore everything fits beautifully. The Gemara says there's still one problem though. And that is, if you're changing your understanding of what the Mishnah means when it says non-Ketores, is that it's not talking about blood applications anymore, then it comes out that what is the halacha about the blood applications? You only have to leave zone 2 during a blood application in the Heichel. You don't have to leave zone 2 during a blood application in the Kodesh Kodashim. That means that there's another difference between the Heichel and zone 2. And that difference parallels the difference in the Ketores itself. In the Heichel, you have to leave the Heichel when any blood application is happening, whether in the Heichel or in the Kodesh Kodashim. But in zone 2, you only have to leave if it is going on in the Heichel, not if it's going on in the Kodesh HaKodashim. So that's a kasha. Why do we leave that out when we're looking for differences between the Heichel and zone 2? So Gemara answers, okay, that's not a problem. Ketores and blood applications are the same. We view them both as the same thing. We covered the two of them when we talk about the differences between them. Okay, next, the Gemara discusses how do we know that you have to leave any zone during the kaparos, during the blood applications of the other kabbanos. We only have it written by Yom Kippur. Which says we have a Gzeira Shava with the word kapara that appears on those kabbanos, and it appears by Yom Kippur, and therefore we learn the halacha that you have to leave the Heichel from Yom Kippur to those other kabbanos. Now the Gemara says, from the fact that the Rabbanan extended the halacha to zone 2, shows me that the different levels of Kedusha that are listed in a Mishnah, Maseches Kelim, are all Dairaisa. Over there it says that between the Ulam and the Mizbeach, zone 2 has a higher level of Kedusha than the rest of the Azara. That must be a Dairaisa halacha. Because if that wasn't a Dairaisa halacha, why would the Rabbanan make a special rule for that? It should be considered the same as the Azara. How come they said, well, we have a Gzeira, that zone 2, you can't be in either Gzeira, you may end up inside the Ulam or inside the Heichel. Why is that different than the rest of the Azara? Make a Gzeira on the whole Azara. Obviously, that's a higher level Kedusha, and therefore, the Rabbanan only felt the need to make a Gzeira on that level Kedusha, not on a step further removed, which is the rest of the Azara. The Gemara says not necessarily. It could be that the Mizbeach is a sign. People know that we're not going to cross the Mizbeach to go inside, but if we're already past the Mizbeach, we might just go into the Ulam and into the Heichel. The Gemara says, well, okay, there's another thing I could see from here, and that is that the Kedusha of the Ulam and the Heichel has to be the same. Because if the Kedusha and the Ulam and the Heichel was different, that means that Dairaisa, when you have to leave the Heichel, you only have to leave the Heichel. You could stay in the Ulam. So then why would we make Gzeira past the Ulam, one level lower than that even between the Ulam and the Mizbeach he can't be? Well, Midaraisa, you're allowed to be in the ulam, and it's only midarbanan you can't be in the ulam because you might go into the heichal. So then you should be allowed to be even midarbanan between the ulam and the mizbech, which is one step further. The Gemara says it's not necessarily that the ulam is the same as the heichal. It could be that the ulam is the same as between the mizbech and the ulam. Maybe really deraisa you only have to be out of the heichal. You're allowed to be in the ulam. And the Rabbanan made Xera on the entire next zone, which was ulam, and between the ulam and the mizbech, which is the same kedusha. You don't know which one it is. Okay, we now move on and we refer back to our Mishnah and we discuss some of the things we said there about the differences between the avodas of gathering the coals on Yom Kippur and the rest of the year. So we had said that every day of the year he scoops it up with a different shovel made out of silver, and we pour that into the main shovel he's going to use to bring it, which is made out of gold. Why do we do that? The Gemara explains because the shovel that you use to scoop the coals gets rubbed out, and we don't want to lose the gold material because the Torah doesn't want to destroy Klal Yisrael's money. Therefore, you scoop it with a cheaper material, which is silver, and you pour that into the gold one. This day, Yom Kippur, the reason that they just used one shovel and scooped it directly with that is because the Kohen Gadol, we want to minimize his effort. He's fasting and he has a lot to do. We don't want him to get weak and to faint. Now, the Mishnah had also said that the original scooping shovel was larger than the shovel that he poured it into. It was machlokes if the scooping shovel was 4 kavin or 6 kavin, but the Mishnah said that he poured into a shovel of 3 kavin. So Gemara quotes a brisa that says that the extra kav that was scattered, he swept into the stream that ran through the Beis HaMikdash, meaning the extra kav of coals that was scattered. Like we said, he's scooping, at least according to one opinion, 4 coals and pouring it into a 3. He's scooping 4 kav and pouring it into a 3 kav shovel, so there's an extra kav that pours out that he sweeps into the amma, into the stream of water. There's a different brisa that says the extra 2 kav. The extra 2 kav he sweeps into the stream of water. The Gemara says 2 kav. How came up with 2 kav? We had 2 opinions. Either it's 4 kav into 3 kav, so there's 1 extra kav, or 6 kav into 3 kav, so there's 3 extra kav. Where do you have 2 extra kav? So Gemara gives 2 answers. The Gemara says either it's the opinion of Rabbi Shalom ben Eish or Rabbi Yechon ben Breka, who says that he was pouring it into a 2 kav shovel, so it's 4 kav into 2 kav, so there's 2 extra kav. Or what happened was that when they came to Yerushalayim, they changed the sizes. And they made the size of a kav 1/6 larger, which means that the number of kavin became 1/6 smaller, and therefore the 6 kav shovel was really now a 5 kav shovel. But he poured it into a 3 kav shovel that was using the old sizes, that was using the new sizes. So therefore it was 5 kav into 3 kav, and there was 2 kav left over. Okay, next we saw that the shovel was lighter. The Gemara explains that it was made out of a thinner metal. The gold was thinner and therefore it was not as heavy to save the Kohen Gadol's energy and effort. It was also longer. The Gemara says the reason is that he should be able to use 2 hands to save his strength. The Gemara adds that it also had a niyashtik. Most of the days of the year, they did not have a niyashtik, a special ring attached that would make a sound, again also saving weight. Now the Gemara discusses the gold. We had seen that the gold was a red gold. So the Gemara says there are 7 types of gold. There are Zahav Toiv and Zahav that's not Toiv. The Gemara says based on the pasuk in Bereshit that says Zahav Eretzahi Toiv, that's the good gold. That implies that there's good gold and not good gold. And 5 other types of gold are Zahav Ophir from a place called Ophir. Zahav Maifaz is extra pure gold. Zav Shachad is thin and stretchable, you can make into thread. Zav Saga, which is such high quality that all their stores close when it's around. And Zav Parvim, which is the red gold that was used by it's so red that it appears like the blood of an ox. Now Rav Ashi says there's actually only 5 types of gold. These last 5 that we said, and each type has a toiv and a not toiv version. Gemara just says, as far as the red gold, we have a brisa that corroborates that. It says that every day they used yellow gold, and on Yom Kippur they used red gold, like we said here in our Mishnah, and that red gold was called Zahav Parvim because it was similar to the blood of the...
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.